for those of you that don't know Tom Black, this is an extraordinary individual, one of the biggest philanthropists that I've ever met in my entire life, and anybody that you will ever meet that has met Tom will all say the same thing. He's got a really loud laugh.
You're right, Shawn. I do have a loud laugh, and I can't help it.
Exactly. But they'll also say that he's probably the most giving person, and he is absolutely the greatest salesperson and sales trainer that you will ever meet. So let's take it back to when Tom was a little kid, and let's talk about your story about how you grew up, because the uniqueness of his story of how he came from where he came from to get to where he is today is fascinating. And so let's hear it from Tom himself.
So I grew up in a little town in Kansas, and my parents didn't finish high school, and then my dad never really had a steady job until after he got back from World War II, and then he knocked around a bit, but he got a job at the post office when I was about 4 or 5, and so then he had a steady work, and he never advanced. It was really interesting when I think about it. He never advanced beyond an entry-level position at the post office. He never had a supervisory role. All he did was his basic job, worked 40 hours a week, except during Christmas when they had the rush season. He got overtime, and I remember we were all excited about overtime because that meant extra money at the house. Not that I got any, but it meant extra money to pay the bills. So I didn't really realize I was low income until maybe 6th grade, and I was wearing my cousin's clothes always. I had hand-me-downs, and no reason not to have hand-me-downs. I would wear them today, frankly, if somebody had clothes that fit me and they didn't want to wear them anymore and I liked them. But anyway, I had hand-me-downs, and some people made fun of my clothes, and so I went home and I had an emotional meeting with my parents, and they said, yeah, we're poor, duh. But they said, you don't have to be poor. They said, you can be as wealthy as you want to because you live in America. And over the years of my life, as I've faced frustrations and disappointments and failures, I've often said to myself, to get my mind right, this is America. And when you think about all the people who have started and had failure after failure after failure and then become wildly successful and wealthy beyond their own imagination, you're going to get the idea that we live in America. So if you're out there struggling or frustrating right now and you need something to buck you up, start with that. We live in America. So my parents said, get an education and take advantage of the free market enterprise. And so I graduated from high school. I was the first person in my family to graduate from high school.
Let's talk about that first, though, Tom. What kind of when you found out that you were poor? At what age did you start working?
Oh man, I worked as soon as I could. I mean, my uncle put me to work on the farm probably at 9 years old. I still remember driving a pickup at 9. Now, I didn't drive it out on the highway,
right.
but I drove it around the farm, and he had me driving the tractor around the farm, and he'd pay me a little bit, and so I would do that. And as soon as I could, I started mowing yards, and so I mowed yards as much as I could. That probably started when I was 13. And I tried to sell seeds. I totally failed at that. I remember you sent in from the magazine to get a box of seeds, and I went door to door selling those. Totally failed at that. I don't know what happened to those seeds. And
let's talk about that because a lot of our audience that are going to watch this, they're a little lost, like we were when we were younger, and we tried all kinds of business opportunities and all kinds of get-rich-quick schemes like that. And they're different. Yours was selling seeds. Mine was classified ads, chain letters.
Yeah. I tried chain letters.
There's all those things. And
yeah.
And how many of those do you think you went through when you were trying?
Oh, 4 or 5 probably.
Yeah.
I was always looking for a way to make my own money. I understood that money meant freedom at an early age, and so I was always trying to figure out a way to make more money. And I was willing to do anything. I had horsepower. I was willing to trade it for purchasing power. And so whatever the job was, I was willing to do it if it meant that somebody was going to pay me. And
right.
I'm sure you were the same way.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And So anyway, I haven't thought about all those jobs that I had, but I remember besides farm work, when I was in school, high school, and I was 16, I got a job at the Matador Room in Hutchinson, and I was the cook's helper. There was an ad in the paper, cook's helper wanted, and I went in and applied for the job, and they said, "You've got the job." It was paying $1 an hour. And I did such a good job that after about 6 months, they gave me a raise, and that was to $1.10 an hour. And a cook's helper, if you don't know, is the dishwasher. And I didn't know it. I was 16, and I started washing dishes, big pots and pans. But luckily, the man that was managing the restaurant was a Hispanic. He had been born in Mexico. He was cooking original Mexican food. And he taught me how to do all the prep work so that he could come in later and later each day. And so I actually learned how to cook really good Mexican food if I ever need to. And I have for Shawn before. Some really great dishes from that experience. But I'd work until 9:30 or 10, and then I'd go home and go back to school the next day, do my homework, show up at work about 3:30 or 4, and work till 10. And I did that all the way through my junior and senior year during the school year. And on the weekends.
Now at that time, we're going to progress into sales, but at that time, you weren't a salesperson. You had the desire, you had the hard work, the workhorse, like you said, but you weren't in sales yet. And so I know your story is you graduated high school and then you started getting into sales.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that. I know you graduated in Kansas and then you moved.
My senior year in high school, before I went to college, I was still trying to make enough money in the summer to go to school in the fall. And I'd saved some from all those jobs, But my parents had told me from the time I was young that when I graduated from high school, I was on my own. Don't expect any help from them. And that had been the same rule that they had applied to my brother and sister. I'd done farm work a lot, and I'd worked harvest a lot. Harvest in Kansas is the wheat harvest, and for anybody that's watching this or listening and lives in the Great Plains understands that, there's one time of the year when you work from dawn to dusk and after dusk to midnight, a lot of nights, and that is when the wheat is ready to cut. And so I knew about that growing up. My uncle had been a wheat farmer, and I had helped him with harvest many times before then. But the custom crews offered a unique opportunity because as long as it didn't rain, you were working. So one time during that summer, we worked 21 straight days. That means we were in the field at 7:30, getting the machines ready to cut. And as soon as the wheat was dry enough, we began cutting, and we would cut until the wheat elevator closed at night. That would usually be about midnight.
So you left right after high school, didn't even go to graduation ceremony.
Right.
And just completely with complete strangers.
Yes.
And with just complete strangers, you say, I know I need to make money for school. I'm going to make money during the summer. I know the wheat farming.
Yeah.
And you took off to Texas.
This was the way. Yeah, this was the way that I knew, the best way I knew to make the most amount of money, because I wasn't limited to 40 hours a week. I wasn't limited to any kind of a schedule. As long as it wasn't raining, we were working, right?
Right.
And so anyway, by the way, it doesn't rain that much in the Great Plains.
Okay.
But anyway.
And just as a side note, so when you go out on when you were out on this crew, where did you guys sleep?
We took trailers. We had trailers, and we slept in the trailers.
And all those were air conditioned with bathrooms?
No. Yeah, they were all air conditioned with bathrooms. No, man. That's so funny. But they did all have a shower, and so we took a shower. And then anyway, we continued, we started in Texas. We drove down to Texas the day after high school was finished, and then we worked our way north until about 2 or 3 days before college started. And I was able to save about $1,600 that summer, which was a lot in those days. And it was, with what I had, enough to make it through the first year of college.
So not a lot of social life. This was a working summer.
No social life.
No social life.
Yeah,
18 years old?
Yeah,
no
17. Yeah.
17 years
old.
old.
And we probably had 2 days. We probably had 2 days of rain. So when it rained, just for fun, everybody would go to the local bar and shoot pool. And there were crews from all over the the Great Plains, and they would all end up in the same bar, And then it never rained more than a day, and so once the rain was over, we would start cutting again, you know?
Okay.
Yeah, it was quite an interesting experience, but I learned the importance of hard work from that. I learned how to put in a day from 7:30 to midnight, you know, and I still remember one morning after about 20 days we'd cut in a row, two of the boys that were my age or 1 year older fell asleep at the breakfast table, you know, because
that's some hard work.
That is.
Were there any people that quit?
Oh, sure. Obviously, you know, you got guys that are out there 2 weeks and they go back home, you know, it's more than they wanted to do.
Yeah, what do you think the difference is between somebody that was given the same exact opportunity as you? Why do you think some people quit and some people like yourself always see it through and get to the end of the day, end of the goal?
People don't want to work that hard, you know, they just don't want to work that hard. And, you know, obstacles, you know, people see obstacles, you know, like I talk about in the training, there's internalists and externalists. And the externalist says, well, I didn't make it because it was really hard and there were a lot of days and my mom got sick, you know.
Right.
And the other guy says, my mom got sick, there was a death in the family, but I promised that man I would be there for him all summer, and so I was there for him all summer, right?
Absolutely.
Sure, did the people that stayed have the same emotion that the kids that went home? Yes. They faced the same emotional turmoil about quitting. Everybody wants to quit that job, you know, and
Right.
the longer you do it and the more days in a row you go without rain, the more you want to quit, right? And the more you say, well, I've got a lot of money, I've made more than I thought I would, et cetera, but, you know, you don't quit because you have a value that says you don't quit, you know.
I agree. That's a good word. There are people that have that value that just won't quit.
That's right.
They don't stop just because they want to. They stop when they're done.
That's right.
And they get it done.
Yeah.
So, okay, so then you go to college for a year, and now let's transition. I know that you got into to working with the Southwestern group.
Yeah.
Based out of Nashville here.
Yeah.
Was that the next summer? Or?
Yeah.
Okay. So was that your first real entrance into sales?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'd failed at some, you know, things, you know, sell at home kind of things, you know, the seeds.
Well, those were you being a business owner, though.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd failed at some of those. Yeah, I failed at
you
some
failed
of
at
those.
being a business owner.
I failed at every one of those. But I guess I was thinking about that when you asked that question, Shawn, and I think I did have a lot of success selling Boy Scout candy. I was always the first or second guy in my troop to sell Boy Scout candy, you know. And of course, you don't make any money doing that, but the competitive nature of it, you know, kept me going. And what I realized when I was selling candy is that if you talk to housewives that were working, you sold a lot of candy, right? And if you talk to people at home by themselves or to the men, you didn't sell too much candy, right?
Now, why is that? How did you figure out that women working, you would sell more?
I don't know, but I did. So I would go to the office buildings, you know, in the community I lived in, and I would call on the women after school that were at their desk working. They had their own money, they had their own decision, and they, I guess, were compassionate to a Boy Scout trying to make money for his troop for camp, right?
Ah, yeah. All right, natural little hustler.
But I didn't make money doing anything else as an independent business. I needed the affinity of the Boy Scouts
exactly.
to be successful.
You know, we're going to talk later about hinging your success to other people.
Yeah.
And that was you hinging your success to the Boy Scouts name. It didn't benefit you personally, but you learned something by that. You learned the value of being attached to somebody of success, whether it's a company or a person, and utilizing that leverage of that brand.
It's the leverage.
And that's a big breakthrough that some people need to understand, is that we all think as entrepreneurs and as salespeople that we've got to do it ourselves. And it's very difficult when you're first starting out and you don't have a reputation, you don't have, you know, a brand. You know, sometimes it's just fine working for somebody that does and helping them succeed, and it helps you succeed. So that's a big learning lesson just in itself.
Yeah. I also learned, though, that, you know, you got to have a system. I didn't have a system selling seeds or shoe polish or pot stickers, you know, pot holders, you know.
Isn't it amazing right now with your experience, if you had bought that seed business, you could probably make money doing it today.
Sure, I know I could, because I understand the law of averages.
Right.
You know, I didn't understand the law of averages, right?
Right.
I understand a quality prospect, you know. I didn't understand a quality prospect then.
Exactly.
Right?
Okay, so you're in college. How did you hear about the Southwestern?
So there were about 30 kids from my college that went and sold books the summer before.
While you were doing the wheat?
Yeah, when I was in high school. And I'd met them over the course of the school year there. They were living in the dorms like me. And a lot of them had made a lot of money, you know. And so I decided that I would go with them. I didn't see them with any skill set I couldn't duplicate, right? And you know, they'd made $2,000 and $3,000 in the summer, so that was more than I'd made on harvest. And I said, hey, sign me up, right? And so I went, and you know, when I left school, I had $50 left. They said have $50 to go to sales school because you pay your own way, right? And that's all I had in my bank account, in my pocket, everything. All I had was $50. I remember, and so I got to sales school with $50, and I paid my expenses while I was in sales school, and it was about $50 for that week. And then we left for Bowling Green, Kentucky after training, and I had $2. And I went out and worked that Saturday, and I got deposits on the books, you know, and that's how I was able to pay my landlord that night when I got home, and also how I was able to eat that night.
Wow. Okay, so now let's talk about this is your first real sales training.
Sure, exactly.
Was with Southwestern for a week.
Yeah.
So you paid $50 to learn how to sell according to their system. What were some of the things that they instilled in you right away? I'm sure you remember. What were the things that they instilled in you right away to get you ready for success for that summer?
So you have to remember, I did this 8 years, 4 years as a student, and then I recruited and trained students like me to do the very same thing. So yes, I do remember, because I trained thousands of students over those 4 years in how specifically to prepare for the summer. So the first thing they do is they teach you to learn what you're going to say. They say, get a script. And they gave us the scripts, and they said, memorize this word for word. Memorize it so that it no longer is a script, but it's part of you. And that when you say this, it sounds like you. And so we practiced it hundreds of times that first week in sales school. We would go to class in the morning, and then afternoon we would spend and into the late night practicing our sales scripts and learning how to present the books, how to answer objections, how to do the approach at the door. Because if you don't, I say this, you know, a stumbling voice gathers no sales. And I believe that based on my experience with the Southwestern Company. And so, you know, that's the first thing they taught me. And then the second thing that they taught me was the power of a no, I guess you'd say. They taught me the power of the law of averages, that a certain number of people are going to say no. That's part of the job. And what you're doing is looking for the people that say yes, but to find them, you have to get no's. And so they totally made me understand the law of averages.
The success that you had early on now you're what, 19 years old, 18 years old, you're being taught for the first time this sales system. Do you think that there was a little bit of naivety of the age and inexperience that you didn't even question what these trainers were telling you? You're like, you know what? I know I want to make money. These are my trainers. They know what they're doing. I'm just going to follow the system and do what I'm told, because that's what succeeds.
Exactly. I didn't question anything. In fact, you know, kind of a funny story is my first summer, they said, now take a cold shower every morning. So this is going to wake you up, get you motivated, get you ready and alert for the day. And so for the first 2 or 3 weeks, I took a cold shower every morning. That's a pain, man. Washing your body in cold water is a pain. But I did it because that's what they told me to do. But then I go to a Sunday meeting, and one of the experienced dealers, you know, junior, senior in college, he says, what do you dislike about the summer the most? And I said, I hate those cold showers. And he goes, oh, you're not supposed to take a whole cold shower. You're supposed to take a warm shower until the very end. Then before you get out, turn on the cold water real quickly to wake you up. So that's what I did.
That is funny. You know, let's touch base. Since we're talking about it, I want to bring it up because it's really important when it comes to the sales training system that that you're putting together. I sometimes find, and you have a lot more experience with this, that the more somebody knows, the more they think that they can break away from the system.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's mind-boggling that when somebody starts to see success doing what they're supposed to do, that's when they'll stop following the system. Why do you think that is?
It's comfort zone issues. It's always comfort zone issues. You know, we do what we're comfortable doing, you know. It's the reason that I have a friend whose son is a pro tennis player. He practices about an hour a day. Now, I know from playing tennis and reading about the tennis greats, Roger Federer, 5 hours a day, Yvonne Lindell, 6 hours a day. You know, Nadal, when he was growing up, 8 hours a day sometimes practicing and playing tennis. And so I think it's naive for somebody who's had success on the college level to think that they're going to get to the pro level practicing 1 hour a day when the very best players in the world are doing 5 or 6 times more, right?
Right.
And it's that little taste of success that lulls you into complacency, you know?
Yes.
And that always leads to tomorrow's failures, by the way.
Absolutely. So your naivety led you to go, hey, I'm just going to follow the system.
Whatever it was.
You go out for the first summer after, you know, this 1 week of training, and they basically just turn you loose. How did you get around from town to town? Did you have a car or buses, or how did you guys get around?
So the ideal situation is you have 2 walkers, 2 kids that don't have a car, and then you have 1 person with a car. So when you need to go somewhere as a group, you have somebody who can take you. But the second day on the job, the person that had the car in my headquarters quit. In fact, it's another story, but he left me 15 miles away from town, in a little town away from my home. I spent the night getting back, and I went back into my, it was a room really, I went back into my room at about 7 in the morning, took a shower, and went back out to work again the next day, you know, because it was very important that you see 30 people a day. It was very important that you worked, you know, from at least 8 to 9:30, you know, and if you did 8 in the morning to 9:30 at night, and if you didn't do that, you weren't going to be successful. So again, my naivete or my unsophisticated approach was do whatever they said whenever they said it. So I bought a bicycle for $15 from somebody. It was a girl's bike, and then the rest of the summer I rode that girl's bike all over town.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now so that first summer, how many cities did you work?
Just one, Bowling Green.
Okay, so just one city.
I started while I was waiting for my license to be approved in little towns like Glasgow and Franklin, Kentucky outside, and my roommate with a car was supposed to drop me off there, and then he'd pick me up at night because he was working in the rural area around there. But, you know.
For those people that don't understand what Tom was doing, what was a common day? What was the product that you guys were selling? Because this company's still in existence today.
It started in 1868. It's the oldest company in Tennessee, continuously operating company in Tennessee.
Right. So what was the product when you were back then selling, and what was the sales process? Walk through a day.
Okay. So first, the product. So we had a set of 10 Bible storybooks, and we had a set of 4 children's books, stories like Mary Had a Little Lamb, poems, you know, 3 Little Pigs, Little Red Riding Hood, stories like that. So we had a set of treasured tales of childhood, and we had a set of Bible storybooks, and those were the 2 things we sold. And then the typical day was we would get up at 6. We would head to the restaurant by 6:30, usually 2 or 3 people in the headquarters. Then we would have breakfast. We would go out in the parking lot. We'd all do a little song to get ourselves excited, and then we would leave to go sell.
How did you carry around the books?
Well, you had samples.
Right.
Samples of the 10-volume set, samples of the 4-volume set, and you carried them in a box. It was a sales case, right? And you carried that sales case.
Okay.
And then, so you know, the idea was to knock on the first door by 7:59.
And how did you find those leads?
No, you just went door to door. Yeah.
What do you mean you went door to door?
So you pick a door in a neighborhood and you start there.
You just knock on the door.
And you say, "Hi, my name's Tom Black."
So there was no sophistication of the internet, like the people want to sit at their computer in their boxer shorts and have leads at them. Your lead was getting your butt outside, walking down the street, and just knocking on the first door.
But I learned the most important lesson of selling. Well, I learned one of the most important lessons of selling, and that is names are magic.
Names are magic, yes.
So
you talk about in great detail the power of remembering and using
right.
your prospect's name.
Yes.
Now, we don't want to give away too much information right now because you're going to see this in the sales system, but there's much power in the use and the remembering of names. But let's not get into that. We got to tease you with that. So your job was to knock on the door of a house,
Yeah.
cold,
Yeah.
and whoever opened that door, the sales process started.
And so they taught us to knock on the door, take 2 steps back, put your sales case down on the ground, turn sideways so that the person coming to the door could see who you were and what you looked like, and you were far enough from the door that you weren't threatening. They would open the door. Many times they'd just peek out the door, obviously, and they'd say, "May I help you?" And I'd turn very slowly and I'd wave at them, and I'd say, "Hi, my name's Tom Black," very enthusiastically, right?
Right.
And then I would give them my approach. And as the summer went on, I found, Bowling Green's not that big a town, and I would have sold somebody from the Church of Christ. The neighbor next door would tell me that the person I was going to see next went to the Church of Christ. So when I got to the door, I'd say, "Hi, my name's Tom Black. I've just been calling on all the families in the neighborhood. Mrs. Jackson, your neighbor, said you went to the Church of Christ with Mary Stevens. I was over at her house last week. May I come in?" And then they would let you in. So it didn't become, because of pre-approach, what we use the internet now for, but because of pre-approach from the neighbors you were calling on, you were able to have some point of reference when you went to the people's home after the first day or two.
It made it a little bit warmer.
Yeah, much warmer.
Much warmer. So you knocked on doors, gave presentations, took orders,
Yep. And
took
deposits.
orders and deposits, one appointment closes all day long for 11 hours. And then who delivered the books? Did those just come by delivery service?
No, we delivered them ourselves the last week of the summer. Now, the students that had cars, and I had a car every summer after my first summer, carried books in their car. And so a lot of times, they weren't expensive. A lot of times people would just pay cash for them, and you'd run out the car and get them and deliver the books right then. But
Okay.
there was always a group of people at the end of the summer that you would deliver books to.
Okay.
Right?
And you got just paid a commission for each book you sold.
Yeah.
That's how you made your living.
Yeah.
So you did that. Fast forward, you worked this sales job for how many summers?
4 summers,
For 4 summers.
then 4 years as a professional.
So after you graduated college,
Yeah.
which you graduated college, first in your family?
Yeah.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
right?
I didn't graduate college.
Oh. Oh, that's even a better story.
Exactly. So after college, did they offer you a job, like a salary job? Okay, so what was that? So what was that?
So it was not a salary.
But wait, let's first talk about that. During those 4 years that you did sales, did you win any awards? Did you set any records during those 4 years? Because I've heard you talk about in some of your stories that you did relatively well.
I did.
What were some of the successes that you had?
So my first summer on the field, I was a top 30 first-year dealer.
So you're top 30 in the country.
Yeah, and I don't know, there were probably, I'm just guessing, 2,000 students in that competition. Right?
So in your first year, you were in the top 30 out of 2,000 people,
Yeah,
roughly. Okay.
and there were some weeks when I was the number 1 rookie for the week, the particular week of sales, right?
Right.
And then the second summer, I lived in Gadsden, Alabama. I had 2 roommates. They stayed all summer long, great guys. They were in college with me. And I was somewhere in the top 30 experienced dealers, but towards the bottom. I might have been top 50. It was top 50, yeah.
Okay.
I was in the top 50. And then my third summer, I was number 1 in the company. And each year you take, after your first year, if you're asked to be a student manager, you bring a team out. And so my second summer I had a team, and they were top 30 team, but not really a great team, small team. And then my second summer, I had the number one. I mean, my third summer, my second year to have a team, I had the number one team in my group. And then the last summer, I recruited about 22 students to come out with me, and I had the number one team in the company that summer, and I was the number one producer again that year. So,
What do you think clicked that took you to number one? What difference? What did you do differently?
well, I spent less time with unqualified people. The book business said, go to every house. And the reason you went to every house is you didn't get in a habit of skipping houses based on the way they looked versus, houses don't buy, people do, right?
Yep, like you're cherry picking.
Yeah, like you're cherry picking. So you don't want to get in that habit. But what I learned was that through pre-approach, especially my third and fourth summer, through pre-approach I could find out which families had kids, in junior high or elementary school. And then I only went to those houses.
Okay.
And I worked through more territory, but everybody I went to see was a prospect for the books I was selling.
Right.
And so...
now you talk about this a lot in the sales training, that one of the most important things is having a qualified. It's one of your four things.
Yeah.
The quality of your prospect plays a large part in how well you're going to do in sales.
Exactly.
And so you learn that right away, instinctively more so,
Right.
because they didn't train that.
No. And I took my sales manager, I broke this record. I still remember most of the guys were selling about $2,500 worth of books a week, and I had a almost a $4,000 week, and my sales manager said, well, tell me about who you're calling on. I said, I'm calling on chicken farmers in Dahlonega, Georgia, right? And he said, okay, so they sound like good prospects. And he said, what's caused you to break out of this? Because no one had ever done that before. It was like a first-time event, in a 100-year history of the company. And I said, Sam, I got to be honest. I am not going to every house. I am going to the houses where the kids are. And he said, well, that sounds okay. If you're disciplined enough to do it, do it. And so I broke all kinds of records that summer with those books because of that. And I want to just say this. The second thing I learned something, and I taught this to our company, the Southwestern company, and I've taught it to all my own companies after that, was I learned something about a buying atmosphere. I learned that if I would say to the people buying the books, Shawn, I don't want you to get these books if you don't think your kids would read them. If the kids won't use the books, then I wouldn't want you to get them. I'm having a great summer. I'm making a lot of money. There are lots of people whose kids would read and use these books, so don't worry about that. Just get the books if your kids would use them. And so what happened was the real issue was addressed in a very positive way.
Right.
And any parents who are listening to this know that if you believed that your kids were going to benefit by a $50 or a $30 purchase, if they were going to get any good out of it whatsoever, you would do it.
Right.
Even if it meant you had to give up beer for a week or cigarettes for a week, or you had to not buy steak that week at the grocery store, you would do it because you were willing to do anything to give your children an opportunity to be more and do more.
Right.
And realizing that, and even today, I guarantee you that if I went to those students, I'd say, every house you go in, ask if they'll use the books. And here's why. The parents aren't going to buy them if they don't think the kids will use the books anyway. You don't lose a thing.
Exactly.
They're sitting there thinking, I wonder if my kids will read these. I bought them lots of toys and stuff. They don't use them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you get to the heart of the matter and you have an open, honest discussion with the prospect, right?
Right.
And so...
and that's creating a buying atmosphere.
Yeah, and it creates a buying atmosphere because he feels or she feels totally in control at that point. Because you're telling them, don't get the books, they wouldn't use them.
Right.
If they use them, I'll sit here for a day and try to convince you that you should get them. Right?
Exactly. So let's talk about your... so there's two things I want to mention. First off, you had a great sales manager.
I did.
Because he enabled you and said, hey, if you're seeing successes and you've got the discipline, keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of crappy sales managers that say, no, you need to follow the system.
That's right.
And they end up hurting the company.
I know.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a good point. I think
That is a good point.
a lot of people watching this, that's very important. As a manager, a sales manager, or even as your CEO, if you're a CEO of your own company, you don't follow a system if you have a salesperson that's knocking it out of the park,
Yeah.
you wouldn't want to limit them because you just say, well, this is just the way we always do it.
Yeah.
You are there to enable your salespeople to make the most amount of money they can, which benefits the company. So that's a big learning lesson. The next is I want you to tell that joke that you tell all the time about that, because you mentioned that you went down to the chicken farmers to sell books and nobody had had success there before. What is the story about the joke that you tell about the guy with the shoes or the soap or something where he goes and he kept coming back with a weird voice that you do? That's a joke you tell. You remember the one?
So Charlie had a speech impediment, and he was an accountant in a toothbrush factory. And he saw the big commission checks that all the salespeople were getting. And so he went to the sales manager and said, I want to be in Dales. Now, I'm not making fun of anybody with a speech impediment. That just happens to be the way Charlie talked.
Right.
And so Charlie said, I can do it. Give me a chance. And the sales manager said, Charlie, you got a speech impediment. Sales is communication, and I think you're better off doing accounting. And Charlie begged him, and finally the sales manager gave him a chance. So Charlie left, and he came back, and the first week on the field, he broke every record of the rookies. And so the sales manager said, you got a job, but tell me, how are you selling so many toothbrushes? And Charlie said, it's easy. I did go down to the 50th corner of town where people walking this way, this way, this way, this way, back and forth. And I put up a booth, and I put up a sign. And the sign said, free brownie. People love brownie. And when they come by it, they want a free brownie, want a free brownie, want a free brownie. Everybody take one. And then they bite in the brownie, and they go, ooh, that brownie tastes like crap. I think it is crap. Want to buy a toothbrush? So Charlie,
I love that joke, man.
I do too.
It's such a good joke.
Charlie found or created a need. He was enthusiastic, and he brought him to a point of decision. And those are all the essential elements of sales, right?
Exactly. Yeah. That's jokes with Tom Black.
We got a lot of jokes.
There's lots of jokes in this brain. In this brain of Tom's, there's a lot of jokes.
Yeah.
Okay, so you break all kinds of records. Your third and fourth year.
Yeah.
Then you get a job with Southwestern. This is your first time being a sales trainer, if you will, as a position.
Full time.
And so there's a lot of responsibilities, and let's talk about this, and this may or may not be something that we use, but there's a lot of times that CEOs of companies will do just that, and they'll take a high-producing sales rep and promote them to sales manager, and sometimes it works, and then sometimes it completely flops.
Right.
Because just because you're great at sales doesn't mean you're going to be a great sales manager, right? They're two different personalities, two different responsibilities, different levels of communication, right? So what happened for you when you did those 4 years as a sales trainer? What was that like, and were you still doing personal production as well, or?
So, recruiting and training college students, I did have a lot of success with that. I did it the way that the company taught me to do it, which was strictly the law of averages. See as many people as you can, tell them about the opportunity, and some kids will want to go out and work all summer long, make a lot of money, right? But what we missed in that whole process of recruiting and training was we missed the focus on the needs of the student. In other words, I can't tell you, I had hundreds, maybe even thousands of students that I worked with during those 4 years. And I can't tell you what their motivation was to go out and sell books. They had that motivation, and they made that decision on their own based on my presentation. But I would never teach anybody to do it that way now, right? I would teach them to find each individual that they were trying to recruit for their business and find out what their needs are, and find out what they need from a job and what they need from a career, and then I would try to meet those needs with my job or opportunity, because you made me think of that, and I've told lots of guys that the emphasis was so much on get as many people to sales school as you can versus let's get some people to sales school who have a real burning desire to finish the summer.
Absolutely. Okay, so now you get done 4 years after with Southwestern. And that's when you transitioned. Is that when you went to work with Bill King?
Yeah.
Okay, so we are finishing.
We're finished with Southwestern.
Finished with Southwestern.
By the way, I got fired from Southwestern.
You got fired from Southwestern.
Yeah. I attacked the executive vice president, the number 2 man in the company, in a meeting, and I didn't attack him physically. I attacked him verbally, and and I was fired. And I would say this, that I would never do that again. I would never advise anybody to say anything in a public environment that was negative about a coworker, especially your boss. But I was 23. I didn't know, or maybe 24. I didn't know much, and so I just said what I thought in the meeting, right? And that was not acceptable. And if the roles were reversed, if I was the executive vice president and he were me, I would have fired me too. But anyway, so I got to work for Bill King.
Okay, so we're gonna transition now from Tom going from his first sales position, learning a sales system with Southwestern, that he still carries those principles today, to then being a sales manager within that organization. And then for those of you that aren't only in sales, but you're also in a position where you own your own business and you're hiring a sales team. And you might be watching this because you want your sales team to be following the Tom Black sales training program. Tom, now at this juncture of his career at 23, 24 years old, gets introduced to the first person that he'll probably call his mentor by the name of Bill King. And this is where we're going to start talking a little bit about hinging your success to somebody else who's successful, hinging yourself to somebody's success. And the importance of that is, especially on social media, one of the most commonly asked questions I get are, I have nothing, I've done nothing, how do I become successful? And one of the ways to do it is to hinge yourself to somebody else's success. So here is a living example of that type of story.
Yeah. So
first off, how did you meet Bill King?
So another man who had worked for Southwestern was working for Bill King. And this man introduced me to Bill. And we did a bowling for buddies of social event. And that's how I met Bill. And then they interviewed me several times, and they were slow to hire. They had a $9 million company. They'd never had any success with salespeople. Most of the salespeople they had, they'd started on a straight commission and they'd failed, you know. And really there were no active salespeople working for that company when I went to work for them.
Well, what did the company do?
We sold products to banks to help the banks sell more checking accounts, enhance their checking accounts.
Okay.
It was called a club program, and most banks have a club checking account program. They buy it from a vendor like us.
Okay. So you interview with Bill, and then what was the first role that you had with the company?
Salesman.
Just a salesperson.
Yeah.
Commission, salary?
I had a
plus?
small base and a commission.
Okay.
And so they gave me Missouri as a territory. So Tennessee had been worked very thoroughly by the two owners of the business and every other salesman that they'd hired for the 10 years prior to that. And so I went to Missouri and I worked there, and I sold banks this product. And I did that for about a year. And then Bill said, do you think you could teach people how to do this? And, you know, I'd already worked with hundreds of salespeople successfully, managed, trained salespeople. And so...
Now, why do you think he asked you if you could train people to do it?
Because he had had so much failure.
And you had success.
Well, I'd never been in his business. This was true business-to-business selling. You know, we're selling products to banks. So I didn't have any real experience, right? And so I did it for a year. I had success, and Bill said, "You can hire one person."
Now let's talk about what made you think that what do you think contributed to your success that first year when Bill had people that didn't succeed? Why do you think you found success?
I had a system. You know, I understood the system, right?
So you took the same system of the law of averages.
Yeah.
And you implemented that into the same sales that you were doing.
Yeah.
You just went from door to door to business.
Right, exactly.
And it was the system that made all the difference.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you know, selling is really selling, you know, and it really is. And I've worked with, as you know, over 300 companies as big as 100 billion, but that's with a B. and as small as $1 million in sales. And
Yep.
I have not seen anything unique about the product in terms of communication skills, right?
Yep. I think that's one of the things that we're trying to make sure that people realize by telling your story of transitioning from certain companies and still finding success in every place that you go is if you follow a system, it doesn't matter what product or service in any industry, in any country, you're going to find success. Now, of course, there are some people that have products that aren't sellable because the product just doesn't have a market. But if you've got a product that there is a buyer out there, if you follow the right system and you see enough people and make enough presentations, you're going to be successful.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's the whole thing that we're talking about in the sales training. So Bill, so let's get back to the story. Bill says, hey, can you train other people to do what you're doing? Because Bill hadn't had success yet as a company.
Yeah.
He saw in you, he recognized in you as a leader, hey, this guy's got something. Let's give him a little bit of rope.
Yeah.
See if he hangs himself
Exactly.
or catches a fish.
And so I hired one man, and we had another successful year. And then they decided that they would hire a bunch of new grads, and we would train these new grads from scratch. We went to the best schools, Harvard, Princeton, Brown, Northwestern. We interviewed at the very best schools. We hired the very best students we could. We gave them a base, and we taught them from scratch how to sell this product to banks.
So the selling system that you are teaching in the training program today is the same principles that you implemented in the first company that you started building the sales force.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so what kind of results did you have back in the day? You were the first kind of real salesperson. You hired one salesperson, and then he says, okay, let's go recruit. What happened over the next few years, 10 years, whatever?
So we built that organization up. It was very successful, and we acquired a very...
Okay, we need some details. What does success mean? You guys went from 9 million to 13 million?
Yeah, that was one hurdle.
So like how many salespeople did it grow to under your tenure? What did sales go, and what did sales go to?
About 9 million to eventually 100 million, but along the way we found a direct mail insurance product that was being used in credit unions. And this was a very small business, 3 or 4 million, but it was very successful in credit unions. And so we acquired that business. And then they let me be in charge of sales to build that business out, right?
Right.
And so I left the other product that we had built up, and I went to this product. Now this product...
How many salespeople did you have at that old product now selling?
Probably 12.
So you had 12 salespeople doing about $100 million in revenue just in that business?
Yeah.
Or
yeah,
in that business
had
unit?
a recurring element to it. So we weren't selling $100 million in new business every year, but we were growing it every year, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So then the next business was this direct mail insurance product, and
Still under the same company or a different company?
Same company.
Okay, same company.
And different division, same company. And I took that organization from 3 or 4 million in sales, and when I left, we were doing about 400 million in sales.
400 million.
Yeah. And the company had gotten to be over $1 billion in sales, you know, and they had merged with another company. They'd gotten to the New York Stock Exchange. A lot of things were going on in the background. I was in senior management. I was involved in some of it, most of it, you know, but, it had nothing to do with, that part had nothing to do with selling. The selling gave us the profits, and it gave us the growth that we needed to do the other things, right?
Yeah.
We couldn't have done the other things if we weren't growing these other two businesses that we had, right?
Yeah, and the other things that we were talking about is just financial engineering, if you will. You're utilizing, you're leveraging the profitability to be able to do some financial engineering to grow the company through probably mergers and acquisitions to get to that level at some point to where you take it public.
Exactly.
Outside the scope of sales, but just a little bit of what happens. So during that time, were you leading the sales organization all the way up? Or
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You hired probably sales managers, and you started leading
Yeah,
sales
absolutely.
managers.
Yeah.
So
And so we had that product, and then we said, well, we're doing so well with this direct mail insurance product, let's look for other insurance products. And we said long-term care insurance would be valuable, right? So we built the largest organization of long-term care insurance people. Most of those guys are still selling long-term care insurance, the managers are. And we got to about 195 agents across the United States, 195 salespeople that we trained and managed to sell long-term care insurance. They were selling it through the affinity of the bank. So the bank would send a letter out saying, if you want to know about long-term care insurance, we're going to have a meeting here at the bank tomorrow night. Come if you're interested. Our salesperson would conduct the seminar on long-term care insurance, and then there would be certain people that wanted to buy.
and who trained those salespeople that were going to the bank?
I did, and
Okay.
I did.
Okay.
And a bunch of guys, but I was involved. I started that division.
Okay. Now is this still under the same company?
Yeah. Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
So you started that when you were 24. How long did you stay with that company until you moved on to the next company?
Well, probably I was 25 or 26. I started really in '84. And so I stayed with it until 91, through 91.
And is that when you guys sold the company?
7 years. No.
Or what happened? What happened there?
My job had kind of evolved to look for other products that we could use this formula for. Small product, hire a sales team, blow it up, right?
Right.
We're having a lot of success with that. And we did it with a competitor for the entertainment coupon books. That was another product we took out and blew up. We acquired entertainment, as well as that.
You guys used to own that little book?
Yeah,
Man, I sold those little books.
good. And so,
I probably made you some money.
yeah. Anyway.
You know those little books? Those little entertainment coupons, buy one, get one freeze?
Yeah,
You guys own that?
yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that was good. And so, anyway, this was a big company. It eventually got to be an S&P 500 company.
What was the name of that company?
The whole corporation was known as CUC. It morphed. So there were divisions under it, but the whole company was called CUC.
So now let's get a little personal here, and this will just be off the cuff, and we'll decide whether we want to use this or not, or figure out a way to use it. So when you start with Bill King at that time at 25 years old, 26 years old, what were you making in your career at that time?
Well, I had made around 75,000 as a sales manager at Southwestern. That was my best year.
Now let me ask this: at this time, did you have aspirations to own your own business at this time, or you were like, hey, I'm a sales guy, and I just want to make a lot of money selling?
No, I always had it in my mind that I was going to be wealthy. So I didn't have a really clear plan about wealthy, but what I told Bill when he hired me was my plan was to be an important part of a company, run the sales organization, and find an opportunity to have ownership in the business as I move forward. And that was my plan.
Okay.
And so Bill bought into the plan, and he was very generous with ownership, and because of the rapid growth in the public markets, in 1990 when I left, I had a net worth of around $5 million.
So from 26 years old to 33, you implemented the sales training that you learned at Southwestern.
Yep.
Use that knowledge to teach that same sales training
Yep.
across multiple different product lines and business units.
Yep.
You use the flag and the umbrella of the business that Bill King started
Yep.
and had built and had the reputation,
Yep.
and you utilized that name and that reputation, used his resources of capital to continue
Right.
to keep investing in the business, and you individually helped build that business in 7 years. When you exited, you now were worth $5 million.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That, my friends, is called hinging yourself to somebody else's success. Tom didn't create the business. He went to work for a business, proved himself, helped that business grow its business exponentially,
Yeah.
and was rewarded.
And Bill was very generous, and he had given us stock options all the way along, and those stock options, because of the growth of the company, were not the typical stock options where you were getting a 10% return or 15. We were tripling sometimes because we were growing so fast. But that's because of the sales, right?
Right.
So anyway, we grew really rapidly, and so those stock options, which probably seemed insignificant to Bill at the time, became worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, you know. And then the last few years I was there, they gave us actual shares of stock in a restricted stock program. And I was thinking that those restricted stock, when I left, were worth around $1 million, $800,000 or $900,000. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so you leave that company at 31 or 33.
Yeah.
And where do you go next?
So I start my own business.
But let's talk about this now. Now you're a big swinger.
Well, there were plenty of people that had more money than me.
But you came from living in a boxcar as a kid,
yeah.
working your summers in the wheat field, working your summers selling books. Now you're making a ton of money at that time.
Yeah.
What do you start doing with the money?
I just put it in my account. You know, my.
You didn't go crazy and go buy a Ferrari
Nope.
and none of
Lived in a
that.
humble home.
So you didn't. You still were in that work mode of this isn't going to last forever.
Right. So anyway.
Okay, so you don't start blowing it.
Right.
You were working so hard that you didn't start blowing it yet.
Yeah, I didn't do any of that stuff. You know, I didn't even realize the power of the money at that point. My whole goal was to see that amount in my
Checking account,
financial
yeah.
advisor, in my portfolio, I guess you would call it. I just wanted to see that grow, and so every chance I got, I stuck more money in there, and I was on a mission to make it grow. You know.
Gotcha.
And so it grew, and then.
Where'd you go after that company then? What was the next one?
So then in '91, we found a piece of software in Iowa that met the criteria that we'd been looking for, which was a product that banks could use that wasn't being sold to banks. And we made a deal with the owner of that business to buy it. And so we
You and Bill?
Bill and I and 3 other investors. And anyway, we ended up buying it. And
this is your first time that you're going, hey, I'm coming in as a founder, partner
Yeah.
in this company, investor. You're not just the sales guy.
Right.
You're now
CEO.
You're now the CEO of this company. You have investors, and this is going to be a company for you to build and grow.
Yep.
So Bill was one of your first investors.
Yeah, he was.
In that.
He was my first investor.
He was your very first investor in that. So this is a good learning lesson here, guys, that if you can help somebody grow their business, odds are, if you prove yourself, they could potentially be your first investor in your new business. People don't really get that a lot, do they?
Right.
That story is a pretty common story, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
I wonder why that's not talked about more, that
I don't know.
one of the ways to find an angel investor is to help that angel investor in their business. And then when you have your idea, you've
Yeah.
got the relationship built. You've
Right.
got the rapport. You've got the trust. And that person says, okay, now I'm going to invest in you because I know what you're worth. I know what you know how to do.
That's right. It's exactly right. And so, anyway, that business was called Private Business. It was a piece of software that allowed banks to loan to customers that they hadn't been lending to before. And we rolled it out. We built a big company.
How much did you buy that business for?
Well, I think we gave the owner $200,000, but we gave him an override. And it might have just been $100,000, but we gave him an override on the business so that he could earn up to $2 million for the business if it did well over 5 years.
Okay.
And he got his $2 million.
Okay, so this guy that had the product,
Making no money from
making
it.
no money,
Yeah.
you guys see the opportunity, you know how to sell, build a company, build the teams. What year was it that you bought that company?
91.
91. What happened? What are the results of that story?
So that company went from probably $50,000 in annual revenue when we bought it to 900 employees, publicly traded. We sold it for $290 million, and during that time I was the only CEO. I was the largest shareholder. It was good.
200 what million?
290.
$290 million.
Yeah,
That's a good day.
that's a good day.
Now that's a story that I joke around that you got 80 million or 60 million.
Yeah, 80 million.
You got $80 million. And how many years did you have that company?
I started in 91. We did the transaction in 98, so about 7 years.
7 years, buy a company for $200,000.
Well, 2 million.
Plus the 2 million on
yeah.
the tail end if it succeeds, and then sell it 7 years later for $290 million, and you get $80 million.
Yeah,
Can I borrow $1 million?
no problem.
So guys, listen, $80 million. Now I joke around about it. Your wire transfer you said wasn't that much.
No, it's 41 million. I immediately sent 8 million.
Just 41 million.
I immediately sent.
Just 41 million.
The next day, guys, I paid $8 million in income tax. Now, just be glad that it wasn't personal income and it was long-term capital gains.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So it was, anyway, long story short, you got to pay the taxes.
Absolutely.
And so I paid the taxes. And then the rest of it was in stock still left in the company that when we went public had a numerical value to it. And anyway.
And that was a pretty decent amount.
That was good, yeah.
All right. So guys, I want. There's something going on here that those of you watching this, I want you guys to appreciate, because I know a lot of you watch these fucking egomaniac, narcissistic people on social media that talk about having a net worth of this and making this much money. Do you see how humble this is of somebody saying, yeah, it was a good day. Yeah, we got $40 million, but I paid $8 million in taxes. Don't always fall for the charisma and the narcissism and egotistical shit going on social media, because there are, for every one guy like that you see on social media, there's 50 or 100 individual successful businessmen and salespeople just like Tom that live a nice private lifestyle, that aren't there for the ego and not there to brag and try to make money off of that fame and fortune. So that's one of the reasons I am passionate about introducing you to somebody like Tom, because this is, in my mind, what I aspire to be when I look to finding success in my life. It isn't about bragging. It isn't about flaunting. It's about the core values as a person.
That's right. And someday when you get done and you're all finished, and someday when you say, I'm not going to work anymore, you're going to be thankful for everything you accomplished, but the thing you're going to be most thankful for are the lives you touched. And so when I had this epiphany about this training program about 7 years ago, and I started doing training every chance I got and doing speaking every chance I got, I wasn't really concerned about how much I was paid. Yes, I want to be paid because there's some value to what I'm doing, but I wasn't concerned about how much I was going to be paid, but I was on a mission to give the information to as many people as possible about, one, how to be successful in selling, and two, how to be a successful entrepreneur if you want to go that route. Because most of the time, people don't tell you. They don't. And the hyperbole that goes on with most sales training and most people on social media drives me crazy, just like it does Shawn. Because there is a system. You follow the system. You do everything you're supposed to. There's no magic to it. And at the end of the day, you end up wealthy. Okay? It's just that simple. And I should be humble about it, because there's nothing that I created that isn't available. It's just that I did what I was supposed to do. So if you're willing to do what you're supposed to do, and most of you aren't, I'll just be honest with you, but if you're willing to do what you're supposed to do, you can have anything you want. This is America. It's America.
Exactly.
Go get it. Go sell something.
And for those of you outside of America, it works there too.
Yeah.
But America, it is a little easier here in America for sure. After you sold private business, you did some of the things that a lot of entrepreneurs do, that when you find that type of financial success, you traveled, bought the big house, bought the cars, started donating a lot of money, started shaking hands with a lot of the big people in the world of food and wine. But instead of talking so much about those types of things, what I want to stick to is something that I know that you always stress to me, which is when you develop a skill, whatever it is, especially the skill that you have, which is selling and teaching selling, that translates into all future endeavors as well. So give us a little snapshot of after you sell private business, you could have just retired at that point. It was enough money that you never needed to work again. You could have just been an investor, put money into the financial and travel the world and done whatever. But you did what a lot of entrepreneurs do and what I'm starting to do myself, which is you started investing in other companies and utilizing that sales training to build other companies and grow those as well.
That's right.
Different industries, completely different, some the same, but some completely different, but it always kept repeating.
Yep.
So tell us a little bit about some of the companies that you then got involved with.
So we sold that business in 98. I was basically out of it, like you say. I did a lot of stuff. I looked for about a year for another business to buy, and we found a business in Springfield, Missouri, a little suburb of Springfield, and they were working on bank equipment. They were a maintenance company. And so my thought was that maintenance is something every bank has to buy. And my other thought was that the maintenance contract is just like insurance, which says that you get a tail, had a lot of success with insurance. And so we started...
tail being residual income.
Residual income. We started building that business, and we sold it 2 years ago. We'd gotten it up to about 500 employees.
How much did you buy that business for?
$2 million.
You bought that business for $2 million.
Yep.
In what year?
2000.
In 2000. And then you had it for how long?
12 years.
Had it for 12 years.
14 years.
Which company was this?
BankSource.
BankSource, okay. And you got it up to how much revenue and how many employees?
We got it up to about 500 employees, a little over 60 million in revenue. It was doing about 2 million when we bought it, and we sold it to some guys. And the thing I'm proudest about that is when we bought that business, we were not working on ATMs. And when we got done, we were the largest independent servicer of ATMs in the United States. We were working on about 5% of the ATMs in the United States.
Wow.
So that was good. And then at the same time we bought that business, we bought a piece of software that helped banks do check imaging. That was called a Magic. And
what year was that?
Same year.
Okay.
2001. And
Okay.
so we built out a sales organization for that, and we started selling banks. And in the first 2 years, we'd sold about 250 banks this product. We caught a wave, For you all that are watching this, you may not remember that 15 years ago, people got their checks back. They actually got the copy of the check back mailed to them by the bank. That doesn't happen anymore because of check imaging technology, and our company was the leader in that, especially in the community bank space. And so anyway, we merged with another company after about 2 years, and that company continued to grow and then went public. That company got to be about $1 billion in revenue. It was called OSI. Now it's owned by a company called Fiserv, all in the banking space. But anyway, that was quite a good experience too. And the reason I wanted to talk about those two businesses isn't because I made $80 million on them. I didn't. I made several $1 million from both of those businesses. But the point I was trying to make was that if you have a system for building out a sales organization, and you can hire good talent in the financial and operations part of your business, you can build a business and make it grow. It doesn't grow because you have a good CFO, and it doesn't grow because you have a good COO. It grows because you have a good sales plan, and you hire good salespeople, and you take it out to the public.
So let's talk about that, because there's a lot of solopreneurs.
Yeah.
We meet a lot of solopreneurs.
Yeah.
People say, I just started a business, I'm trying to
Right.
grow it. And one of the first questions we always ask is, well, how many salespeople do you have?
Yeah.
And the answer is always, well, it's just me.
Yeah.
And then we say, well, who does your accounting? Who does your customer service?
Exactly.
Who does your product fulfillment? Who develops your product?
Exactly.
Who answers the phones?
Yeah.
Well, I do. They're losing money every day,
Yeah.
right? They're losing money every day because the first thing that they need to start doing is
Get revenue.
get revenue. Start building out a sales team.
I mean,
And how much money do you need if you're a solopreneur and you want to start building a sales team? How much upfront money do you need?
it depends on the production cost of your product, you know.
But have you ever seen companies build out a sales team, build out that sales team with pure commission?
Sure, of course. Absolutely. It's the way I did every business.
Don't
when I
even need
started.
no salary.
You don't need to-
Hire somebody on commission. They don't get paid till you get paid.
Right.
Don't need a lot of money to hire somebody like that, yet people just don't do it. And the reason why is they don't have a sales system themselves.
Yeah, that's right.
They're winging it, and they don't have the confidence in their own sales system in order to grow that business and train that salesperson. And they're scared that they're going to hire a salesperson that's going to fail and lose them money
Yeah.
because they don't have a sales system.
I know. And, you know, it's like Bill. He'd had so many failures when he hired me the first time that he was afraid to hire me. And then he was afraid to hire other people because he didn't think he could train them, and he couldn't.
Right.
You know? But he found somebody who could. You know?
I mean, let's just take you and I. I mean, that's how we met.
Right.
Is I knew how to sell. I'd gotten the company up to a couple $1 million in revenue with my company, so I knew how to sell. I hired a few salespeople that were doing okay. But
Shirley was good.
Shirley was good, but
Very
I didn't.
good.
But I didn't know how to teach someone how to sell. I didn't have a selling system. I knew how to wing it, just like a lot of sales people without a system know how to do.
Yeah.
And we ended up taking the company, doubling the company in a couple years because you came in and you taught a sales system to the reps. You taught the analytics that they needed to reach every single day to make X amount of phone calls, to do X amount of presentations or appointments, to do X amount of presentations, which then led to a certain amount of sales. And then you taught me how to manage that on a weekly basis to see who was succeeding and who wasn't succeeding and who needed help and who needed more.
And who needed to go.
And we just followed that system,
Yeah.
and it grew the company. And there's a lot of entrepreneurs that don't know that they just need to implement that same system, and it works in every single business.
And so I was doing training for a company today that has 90 employees, a very rapidly growing company in the IT space, and they have no selling system. And because they have a product that's in high demand, they haven't had to have a selling system. You know, they've survived on people calling in and referrals from their investors mainly. And so the point is that, you know, if they had a selling system, they could magnify that growth, you know, because that's what a selling system lets you do.
Right, absolutely. Private business, eMagic, Bank Source. Any other entrepreneurial ventures that you're proud of?
Well, I should say this: I failed at a couple. One that I lost about $1.5 million in. It was a speaker business, and I have got the greatest speakers on the planet, right? But we never could get any traction. And then the other one was a product that we took to banks that we actually sold to 50 banks the first year, but the banks didn't use it, and so at the end of the 2-year contract, the banks weren't renewing, so we just shut that down. But and that was a couple of $1 million that I lost in that business. But about 7 years ago, the chief counsel.
I just love how you nonchalantly go, yeah, just lost a couple $1 million in that one.
Yeah. So 7 years ago, my chief counsel.
You know what I'm saying? I just lost a couple $1 million in that one. Okay, go ahead.
So 7 years ago, my chief counsel at Private Business was terminated from his company, and he looked for a job for a while, being another corporate counsel. He didn't want to go into private practice. And I kept telling him about an idea that I had for banks that I thought would make a great company, and that he was the ideal person to be the CEO for that company. And so he was the first employee. We founded the company together. It was called In Contracts. And what we did was help banks with their risk and vendor management in a piece of software and automate the process for the banks. Most of them didn't have it automated. And so anyway, we did an angel round of funding, and we tried to get people like me to invest in it. And
You should have given me to invest in it.
yeah, I should have. Yeah.
You did. You tried to, and I didn't. I hadn't sold. I hadn't sold my company yet, and so I didn't have the extra cash. And so, but yeah, I remember.
Filarowski did.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, so we raised about $3 million. Mike, the CEO, put some in, as much as he had. I put about $500,000 in, and we ran that business for about 5 years. We got it up and going, and some private equity people came in and took out all the angel investors except Mike and I, and the least anybody got was a 3x, and some people got 4x on the money that they actually put in, depending on when they put their money in, but nobody was in over 5 years. And
Right.
so it was a really good return for everybody that invested, right?
Right.
And so now the company has about 700 financial institutions. It's made an acquisition. It's probably going to make another acquisition here pretty soon. And we're the leader in the banking space for risk management and vendor management. So
Awesome.
I'm really excited about that. I help them with the sales training. I do some recruiting for them, but that's how.
So you've evolved. You know, something that I've learned a lot from you, Tom, and I implement this in my everyday now is when you reach a certain level of success, and now we're talking more about your entrepreneurial journey as opposed to sales in itself. We built up a tremendous network to help other people.
Right.
And
That's right. That's a good point.
a lot of people get paid to do that. They're called
Yeah.
rainmakers, as
Yeah.
you know. You don't get paid to do it. You just do it out of the kindness of your heart. When I introduce people, I do it out of the kindness of my heart. But there are people, as you know,
Yeah.
called a rainmaker, and that's what they do for a living. They
might
know
charge
people.
$15,000 to introduce somebody.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And people will pay it because they might get $1 million contract
Yeah,
out of it.
exactly.
You know, but one of the things that you just mentioned, you help them with recruiting is, you know, when you find success in your life, one of the things that you do is you meet a lot of people. And success, people like to be surrounded around successful people that, you know, they know have paid their dues, made something of themselves, you know, in society, and there's a lot of power and value in that. And that's one of the things that I preach in, you know, I talk about you as a mentor of mine, and that's one of the things that we do as successful people is we start to give back and mentor others.
Sure.
And you know, there's all kinds of relationships when it comes to mentor. You know, I'll call you once or twice a year, if that, and say, what do you think about this deal I'm working on? You know, we're friends, so we talk a lot, but there are times that I reach out to you from a mentor, but we've never sat down on a weekly basis and said, let's go over my life
Right.
and let me ask you a
Coaching.
question.
No coaching.
That's coaching.
Yeah.
You know, mentor is having the ability to pick up the phone and call someone like you or me.
And everybody should have a mentor.
And everybody needs them. Yeah. I know that you mentioned that Bill was one of your, you know, probably, you know, your biggest mentor in your life, but
Yeah.
who are some, have you
Sam
had any?
Johnson, you know, who was the guy who recruited me to sell books, you know. Will Martin, I'd have to say, is a mentor, although Will worked for me. I mean, I paid him. He was an attorney. I really appreciate his advice and counseling, and he's been a really good mentor for me. Yeah. It's funny that he would have an employee role but be considered a mentor, I know, but he is. He was really great and very, very helpful. But those are the guys that have really helped me. You know, one of the reasons about 7 years ago that I decided I wasn't going to do any more businesses is because I didn't want the pressure of building a business, and I didn't want the hours I was putting in to build a business.
Yep.
So once we got InContracts off the ground, Mike works, the CEO of InContracts works 90 hours a week. You know, we have a call every week on Saturday or Sunday morning at 6 or 5 or 6 in the morning. I mean, it lasts an hour or more. He is a committed individual, and of course the results are showing because he is committed. But you know, I didn't want to do that anymore, and so I began working with companies to help them improve their sales system and improve the people's sales skills And then I do some individual coaching of salespeople, and I do some keynote speeches where I inspire, motivate, educate sales teams, in a speech to do more, be more, have more, right?
Yep.
So that's been a lot of fun, but I haven't been working 90 hours a week at that.
Right. You work 90 hours a week still, though. I know you do.
I kind of do.
You do 90 hours a week just looking at the baseball statistics on Monday morning.
I'd get up and look at the baseball statistics.
Absolutely.
Go Cardinals.
Exactly.
Go Cardinals.